So in our story today, the one, as I said to the kids, it's about the birth of Moses. You may be among those who would zip through those first actual story in Exodus so that we might get to the main star, right? Our hero, Moses. This movie-like origin story where he floats down a river in a basket and joins the upper class. But in these first few verses, before Moses is even introduced, this tale of Shiphrah and Puah is an important one, so that we might see what a courageous response to oppression depends on. It depends, we see, on our openness to the openness of God, to community and each other. A case could certainly be made that they are some of the most important characters in the entire story of Exodus. Because without their bravery and ingenuity, Moses is not born. There is no continuation of the story begun by the families of Genesis. What is wonderful, I feel, about the book of Exodus in particular is just how current it always seems to feel. Oppression, power, misused professionals, hope, fear, division, reconciliation are consistently a part of our world. Fear and bravery are two sides of one coin, as we can see clearly within this text. In contrast with the braveness of the midwives, this unnamed king of Egypt acts out of fear. He is afraid because of their numbers, their overwhelming nature, and begins himself down a path that requires more and more, a constant leveling up of continuing oppressions to ensure that his nation continues the way he wants. And so he assigns hard work. And then through the midwives and their attempt at control, and then through open genocide. He might not be saying they're taking our jobs, but if you listen clearly through the text, that sentiment is there, and one that is too well known in our own nation, in our own time. During Bible study this week, we spoke about how long it might have been since the time of Joseph, when he was able to protect and guide the Israelites to a place of necessity within the Egyptian system. And while it feels too fast for the tides to have turned against them, in refusing to collaborate, the midwives participate in resistance as life, demonstrating justice in action. The elements are here for so many cinematic visions of this ancient story. Can you envision a movie, series, TV show that parallels with this story of Exodus? Yes. And of course, there are those made from the story of Exodus, Prince of Egypt, 10 Commandments. But what about others? If you're thinking science fiction, you might go to Star Wars or Dune, comic book sagas of both the DC and the Marvel universes. All of our historical or almost historical stories of all of our world wars, the Middle East. All of them have these elements. And one of the shows I happened to watch this week, in part, was Andor, which is a story of the Star Wars universe. And I was very obviously clear on how these elements parallel so well with Exodus. Andor is the story of Cassian Andor. The series explores a new perspective from that Star Wars galaxy, focusing not on one journey, and that of the ones we know, the Luke, the Leias, the Hans, but the goal is to discover what a difference one person can make. As Disney Plus explains it when they announced it, the series brings forward the tale of the burgeoning rebellion against the Empire and how people and planets became involved. It's an era filled with danger, deception, and intrigue where thieves embark on the path that is destined to turn him into a rebel hero. This is the story of those who are not Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Leia Organa. They are those who are nameless in the overall picture, who do not get medals of recognition, but without whom the quiet oppression of the Empire would continue to separate and divide. The people needed a cause to unify around, some identity other than that of being beaten down, and in those who would start the rebellion that heaped up oppression on oppression is what will galvanize them into a force. I can see Shifra and Pua there, knowing how they work within the regime, fighting with a simple lie and the allowance of life to take hold. This is certainly a story of how to create hope. But another picture I watched this week spoke volumes of rebellion as well. The story of how rebellion is set up, how it is birthed into the world, a story of how everyday bravery changes lives, a story about standing up for yourself and those you love as an act of defiance for unjust systems. A movie which at the time might not have felt like it had much to do with Exodus or Moses or even these midwives, Shipra and Pua. So hear this synopsis. As middle schooler Emily Elizabeth struggles to fit in at home and at school, she discovers a small red puppy who was destined to become her best friend. When Clifford becomes a gigantic red dog in her New York City apartment and attracts the attention of a genetics company who wish to supersize animals, Emily and her clueless Uncle Casey have to fight the forces of greed as they go on the run across New York City and take a bite out of the Big Apple. Along the way, Clifford affects the lives of everyone around him and teaches Emily and her uncle the true meaning of acceptance and unconditional love. Yes, Clifford, the big, red, lovable, goofy dog, is a movie of rebellion and community-building power, using the act of living to be an act of defiance. Clifford may be the title character, but it is in Emily Elizabeth that we have a main character. She who builds a network around her of neighbors, school friends, even the school bullies, to make a new world. She is actively engaged in supporting and valuing life in ways that the corporate greed is not interested in. In both of these alternative storylines, there are main characters. And in both of them, and in countless other stories, fiction and real life, we hear the tale. We live out the tale that power comes from within the gathered community, as an opposition to that wielded by the select few. In all of these, there are supporting characters, without whom the story could not move forward. When opening the door to his $27 million home, the father of Emily Elizabeth's friend doesn't even bat an eye at the 12-foot-tall dog breaking priceless objects with a happy tail. And without the sanctuary in that home, the movie would have been over in a half an hour with no happy ending and no big, red, happy dog making community out of a city block. Clifford uses direct love, connection, as a means of embracing his place in the world and challenging the unjust, the selfish, the egocentric. To incite a rebellion requires that people, those within and those outside the system of power, notice how their role is needed for the good of the whole. Oppressive systems are all around us all the time because power needs an outlet, and that outlet requires that no one is seen as equal. We are within and creating systems all the time. So we must pay attention to ensure our actions are not taking the side of those that would destroy. We must, like Shifra and Pua, like Clifford and Emily Elizabeth, and Owen's father, and Andor, and countless rebels, seek how our talents can be used to build life, grow capacity, bring joy, in the midst of whatever the world will throw our way. The midwives do not engage a direct confrontation. Instead, they work within the system. They use cunning to achieve their goals. This text demonstrates that their approach is needed, is valid. It is because of these two that Moses is later able to resist Pharaoh. The story of Shiphrah and Puah is one that tells us that no one is ever small. No role is insignificant. We may be our own main characters in our lives, but at the same time, we are also the supporting characters necessary for each and every person we impact on the way. We could look through the lens of Exodus at countless movies, shows, video games, and see the same elements being lived out again and again. When we are faced with oppression, our cultural markers, our faith stories unequivocally point us to the same path. Do the most good you can. Make a difference. Build up others. Embody justice communally. You matter, our tag says this year. Embody justice because you matter. Amen.